Hello, and welcome to week 11, I believe, of the Basic Television course. And today we're going to add on to what we were talking about last week, having to do with making corrections to the video signal and improving your product in post-production, that is. And we're going to take two relatively important steps here, which are a little bit beyond the basics, but I do want you to understand that they're there. So even if you don't take advantage of these techniques, I want you to be aware of them because they will help you in the future. And we're going to talk about the audio this time around because audio often gets neglected. It's a simple fact when you're out there shooting television, you're staring at the monitor, you want to get everything perfect there. But then after you're done with all that, then you say, hey, did we set up a microphone or something like that? And that is where we have to really emphasize that this is not something to be taken lightly. Before you start shooting, you should hear your audio and you should know that it's good. And so use the right microphone. We talked about microphone placement before. But if there is a problem with audio, you really need to address it because your audience will not forgive an audio error. Then to some extent, they'll forgive a video error. Not everybody will spot a white balance problem, but if you can't hear what someone's saying, they will notice that. And so that's what we're going to be addressing now. So we're talking about audio corrections and program connections today. And so that rhymes really well, but the important thing to understand is that the reason why we're doing this is that the Adobe suite of programs is actually multi-programs that connect with each other. And so some programs have some incredible specialities. For example, obviously Adobe Premiere is engineered to edit video, and they've had a lot of time to develop the program, and to be honest, it is one of the best video editing programs I have ever seen. With that, they also have other programs that do more specific things. For example, Adobe Audition is a very good audio editing program, and Adobe After Effects goes beyond the Premiere's ability to make very subtle adjustments to video. And so what I'm trying to indicate here is that for some reason, they have tailored these so that you can call to one program within another. And that is an incredibly useful feature. Now, when they first started doing it, I'm not going to say it worked perfectly because it's asking a lot of the computer involved. But that's one of the reasons why we build such great computers, so that they can do this. And also, the coding has gotten better. And I'm going to say at this point that you can trust it for the most part. It may slow things down just a little bit, but it might be worth it if you need to make a correction. Now that said, that's not to say that that's the first thing you'll do, meaning that if you can work it out in the Premiere program, so much the better. But if you need more help, go to the other programs, and this is a way of making that work out that much easier. Okay, so to recap what we were saying before, digital video and audio is virtual, meaning that it does not exist, but the programs that we edit with don't exist either. See, that's what's really interesting. Your computer hardware exists, but basically nothing else does. Everything that you do with the computer is all basically a fantasy. But the fact that we all agree on it makes it work. Programs like machines do things. So let's go back in time. Say to, go way back to the 1970s, and you had people like George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars and some of the other great filmmakers. And one of the things that they would do is go to Paris, and they would buy incredibly complicated film equipment. Film chains, moviolas, things like that. Those were machines. And if they came up with a better idea for a machine, if you'd already bought the machine that they did last, you're out of luck. You got to buy another one. And it was very unlikely that you'd be able to take an existing machine and make it do something else. Now, on the other hand, programs can be changed. And so, in the course of time that you have been with Methodist University, I am pretty sure that the programs we use have been updated at least once, significantly. And so that means that not only are they less problematic, but they've gained capabilities that we may not even be aware of. And so that's an important thing to understand. This gives us a great advantage. And Adobe is not only one program, but it is a suite of programs, meaning like a hotel suite. You got one room here, and this and that. And so you can literally attach them together if you need to. And we're going to demonstrate a little bit of that today. Now let's talk about audio sweetening. Now the reason why audio sweetening is important is that obviously not everything works right the first time. If you shoot video, something can go wrong. And it could be that you need to pull out some details. It could be that there was some noise that you didn't notice that you got to fix. And by the way, that's actually normal because, and I've said this before, we hallucinate most of what we see and hear. So you may not notice a buzzing sound in the room because you've been in that room before and your mind literally tunes it out. And so while you're recording, the machine can't tune it out. And so if you hear it in the headphones, that's when you do notice, oh, what's that sound? Was that there the whole time? And so those are the sorts of things that you may have to correct in post. Now, both audio and video can be adjusted in post. Audio is often overlooked in production, as we said. And you can edit audio without losing sync. Now, that's an important thing. Now, going back to the idea of the suite of products, before Adobe, if you had a problem with the audio track, and if we go back even further to the days of tape, it was worse. Now, let me explain why. Video was always timed perfectly, one of the few things that actually worked in 1939, because they used the electrical current to time the video. And so, just not to go too far into the weeds, but the electrical current in the United States is 60 hertz, 60 cycles per second. The television standard was 30 frames a second at 2 fields per frame, and so it was 60 fields per second by the electrical signal. Now, on the other hand, audio, a tape recorder, was basically timed by an electric motor. And if the motor was slightly off, you're in trouble. It's always going to be a little bit off, meaning that if you were to record something on a tape recorder and play it back, it may sound perfectly all right to you, but it may be a little fast or a little slow. You'd never notice. On the other hand, if you're recording your audio track on a bad tape recorder and your video track on something else, and you put them together, they're gradually going to lose sync. And so that's why you had to have really, really expensive audio recorders in the film industry that would keep sync perfectly. And that's something we didn't have to work with in general. Now, that said, into the days of where we are now, you got your audio and your video synced up because you shot it that way, and hopefully it stays that way. If you were to not have the Adobe connection idea, you would have to take your file, take the audio off of it, take it to another program, fix it, and try to bring it back. Now, generally, with computer technology, that shouldn't be an issue, but that's not to say that it couldn't be. So here, it just takes that headache off your shoulders because the program does it all internally, and that's what I'm trying to say. And so basic audio editing is available in Premiere. Always do that first. Anytime you've got to reach out, it's always going to create a few headaches. But beyond the basics, you have access to Audition. And so all the programs are connected, as we said. Now, the types of audio effects that you might want to use. First of all, volume control. And this you're going to do a lot. Mostly, this is perfectly all right in Premiere. If your volume is too low, now if it's really too low, you may have a problem, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's say your volume should be peaking at around -5 to -7, and it's peaking down here. It's say -12 or -15. That's easy enough to correct. Just add a few decibels to it. Either just right-hand click on the audio track and just add a certain number of decibels and see what that does. Or you can go into the program effects, right there automatically it gives you volume control and boost it as high as you can there or as high as you need to. And then chances are that's going to solve the problem. Now, if it's overmodulated, the same thing occurs. You can reduce the audio a little bit. If it's overmodulated, if there's no damage been done, that you can sometimes catch it. But ideally, that should be the extent of it. You shouldn't have to go into Audition to handle a volume issue. Now, on the other hand, if it's way, way too low and you boost the hell out of it just so you can hear it, and you've got a terrible hissing sound, that's where you may need some extra help, if in fact you can fix it at all. Okay, a stereo pan. So generally in the field, if you're recording a microphone, a voice mic, you're recording mono. So when you're editing this, you can have one person's microphone slightly to the right in the stereo pan, another person's microphone slightly to the left, and that will give you a more natural approach. Now, the ambient sound may already be stereo. If you're using the camera's microphone to get the ambience, that's a stereo mic, so that could be even better. And so you can mix a stereo mic, and you can use Adobe Premiere to vary your stereo pan a little bit if you need to. And that much can be done in Premiere easily without having to reach out. Equalization, even there, you have a great deal of freedom with equalization. Noise reduction is when we get into a little more specifics. The more complicated your noise reduction becomes, the more you may need to reach out to another program. And of course, any advanced effect, reverb, and some of those other things, then that's all in Adobe Audition territory where you might want to be if you want to do specific effects that really don't come with the package. Now, let's talk about noise reduction for a minute, because there's a couple of layers of noise reduction. Again, some of these you don't have to reach out very far to get. Now, noise is anything that competes with the target audio. And so, let's say that you're shooting in a room that has an air conditioning system that's going brrrr, and that's a constant noise. Again, you might not notice it when you're setting up, but sometimes you do. And I'm going to warn you in advance that that is an incredible problem that a lot of people have to deal with in shooting. If you're shooting a drama, for example, that takes place, heaven forbid, in a restaurant, you have no idea how noisy restaurants are until you try to shoot in one. Meaning that you got to go and shut off the air conditioning, you got to shut off every refrigerator because they all make noise. You know, all those little counters where you can see the food there, that's all got a little compressor there that's making noise. That can be a nightmare. And of course, shutting that off, that's another problem because you don't want the food to spoil either, so that means you're on a clock. But it doesn't even have to be that. If you're in a supermarket, you've got the Muzak system going. Now, that's something you do have to shut off. And I'm just speaking from experience. But it could also be just something as simple as a bad fluorescent light that's making a buzzing sound, or traffic noise outside. And the more complicated and unpredictable the noise becomes, the harder it is to remove. Or it could be something like a cell phone ringing that only happens once, but it happens at the wrong time. Okay, so we're talking about all different types of noise that can happen, and a well-placed microphone limits this. Now, let me say that again because it's important. If you're using a lavalier microphone, remember, that's a short-range microphone. If I've got a lavalier microphone on here, it's hearing me at this close. I'm this far away, I'm losing it already. So therefore, if somebody's cell phone rings 20 feet that way, you're probably not going to hear it as loudly as you might think. Because the lav is not going to get it. And so that can be a good thing. It's just a well-placed microphone saves most of this. On the other hand, if you're using a shotgun microphone or some other microphone like that, yeah, you may point the microphone away from the noise, but you still might pick up more of it than you want. And so there are ways of getting rid of this. Now, sometimes you want some of this noise. In fact, sometimes you record it deliberately to put in over your video because that's the way the room sounded. You know, it's like you can even add like seagulls if you're shooting a beach video or something like that. Some of that wasn't there at the time they recorded it. So really, the audio engineer has a lot of latitude here. And distracting noise can be managed in two ways. Let's talk about these. Now, first, equalization. And so when we're talking about distracting noise, we're talking about a constant noise that's always in the background. So let's say you go way back in time to the tone control. Now, if you've ever owned a very cheap sound system, you would have a volume control, and right next to that, you would have a tone control. And so if you turned it to the right, the sound would become more hissy because the higher frequencies would be emphasized. If you turned it down, it would start to be more bassy, that sort of thing. So that's what a tone control would do. And that's a horrible way of adjusting audio quality. Now, the bass, treble, and mid-range, that was your slightly higher end stereo system. You had a bass dial, which would only control the lower frequencies. You would have a treble dial, which gave you your higher frequencies, and the mid-range would give you your mid-range. And then, of course, you have what's called a graphic equalizer. Now, I've got a picture of one down here, as you can see. And this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is 9 sliders. And so on one end you have the high notes, and the other end you have the low notes. And then you basically create some sort of an image where you are creating the right sound effect. So if you've got extra bass, you just bring down the lows. So up here you have something that's more than twice as many sliders, and so the more you want to pay for these things, the more options you get. But the important thing to understand is now that we are in the virtual world, now that we're using programs instead of machines, because these are machines, now that we're using programs, you can have as many of those sliders as you want. You know, you just tell the computer to give you 400, and it'll give you 400. And you can, or maybe not that much, but you can go in there and adjust some very minute sections of the audio, and if that does it for you, great. And so all of this is suddenly available whether you use it or not. Now each bar represents a handful of frequencies, and the more bars you have, the smaller that handful becomes, and removing those frequencies can remove noise. And so if you've got that air compressor that's going brrr, and you find which frequency is really doing that, and you pull it off, then suddenly you don't hear it as much. And then if you don't need the audio that's on those frequencies, if other speech is more higher range than that, you may not notice it at all. You know, meaning that if you got someone that speaks at almost the same pitch as the air conditioner, that could be a problem, because you pull out the air conditioner, you pull them out too. And so that's part of the game, and that's one of the reasons why we have these things. Also, if you've got someone whose voice just doesn't sound very good, you might be able to improve on it by adding some bass to it if it's a screechy voice, or maybe if they have a low voice, you know, try to favor some of the higher frequencies so that you can bring out character of the voice that you wouldn't normally hear, because low tones tend to dominate, you know, when they exist. And so you can give them some help. So that's why audio engineers and people that do nothing but that, they're always tinkering with those things. The average person may not notice the difference, but it is important to be aware that it's there. Okay, noise reduction, spectral reduction. Now, this is removing specific sounds that occur maybe once or twice. You know, like for example, the unwanted cell phone call, or the little bell that rings, or something like that. And so there, you can use what's called the Bandaid tool in the Spectrum editor to clean that up. And it does actually work. And so we'll try to find an example of that to show you. And so you can literally go into the audio, find one specific thing that you want to remove, and take it out. And if you're lucky, it will work. It's not perfect, but it does work. Again, it's always better if you can get it right the first time. Now, the noise print is the last thing we'll talk about. And that is probably one of the biggest magic tricks I've ever seen, because basically we're using computer power to get rid of a noise that may not necessarily be as clean cut as something like a constant tone. We could be talking about traffic sounds or flocks of birds and stuff like that. But if the computer can figure out what the nature of the sound is, it can basically remove most of it. Now, a constant noise can be mapped and understood. If the computer maps this, there you go. And using the noise reduction tool in Audition, you create what's called a noise print. All you need is a sample of the noise itself. And so you find a section of the video where no one was talking, but you can hear the noise. You say, this is the noise print. And then there, you take the print and subtract it from the rest of the audio, and it can do wonders. You know, suddenly the audio can be a lot clearer. Now, yes, you will be removing a little bit from the voices, but if it's not incredibly apparent what that is, it will be better than not doing it. And the result is better quality sound. You know, again, it's better if you can get it right the first time, but if you can't, you can't. And again, it's not perfect. Okay, reintegration. And this is important to talk about. Once you're done with the corrections, the original audio is replaced. Now let me explain why you need to be concerned about that. You have basically, you're in Premiere, you're going over to Audition. So Audition is now running here. Premiere is over here and kind of going like this. You're working on Audition. You get the audio fixed. Audition is like another country. It's created its own little universe for you. And so it's got your project. It's kind of like sending it out to a lab. And so then you fix it. Then you go back to Premiere. So Audition goes up here. Premiere comes back down. And so what it will do is it will tell Premiere that audio, that whole section of audio, basically remove that and replace it with this version. And that's exactly what you would have to do if you were doing it manually, but it will work. Now, here's the only problem that I see with this, and it's not a huge problem, is that you know where your original audio is. It's with the footage. So you've got your folder with the footage in it, you got your video files, and the audio is with those. Now you're in the timeline. Suddenly what we've done is we've said, you see that audio down there? That's not this audio. That's audio that's up over here someplace. And the question is, where is the actual corrected audio? It may not be obvious. You may have to hunt for it. But more to the point, every once in a while, the program hiccups and the audio gets lost or something gets lost. It could be like a transition gets lost. And then when that happens, there's either silence where it's supposed to be, or if it's a piece of video, there'll be that little red screen that says, can't find it. And that is a terrible nightmare when that happens. Okay, so Audition will create a new file and substitute over the original. And also, if you move from one workstation to another, let's say you've got everything on some kind of a external drive, you take it to another computer. Well, hopefully the program's stored it on the external drive, because it doesn't always. It may have a scratch folder that it uses somewhere else, in which case it's going to have to remake it, and that could be a problem. Okay, the same thing is true of After Effects, and so you'll want to be aware of that. Okay, so here we are again in Adobe Premiere, and once again we've got our program monitor here. These are our scopes. This is our timeline, and down here we have our projects window. And we have our effects controls here, which I'll move myself out of the way when we talk about those. But I wanted to start with something that was rather important. I want to show you what the difference is between good audio and bad audio. And I want to show you some underutilized features that occur in Adobe Premiere. So I have collected some audio that I think is a good example of what good audio looks like, and then we're going to compare that to bad audio. So this is a straight audio track. There's no video component to this. The video component was shot later. So if you look at this, now you can see the track down here, and you might think, well, I can't tell whether that's good or not. Well, there's a way of doing that. If you grab hold of this, you find that little section there, you can pull that down. You can get a better look at it. And also with these handles, we can begin to get a view of this. Now I want to compare this to something. Let me play some of this. Let's see how that comes out. If I were to play some of this audio.
Ones that were fit for the steel mill, so they wound up hitting the streets, making minimum wage, so they lost their homes, their cars, their families. And
now I want you to look at not the audio itself, but the silence in between the words. Now, notice words, words, silence.
Freaks making.
Now you can tell if audio is good if the silence is a flat line. Now let me compare that to something else. If I were to scoot over to this piece of audio, and I'll just happen to land there, you see it's already pulled up here. Now if I were to zoom in on that, let's see what we get. Now here, you can barely see it, but that's silence. Notice how the silence isn't that much lower than the voice. And so that audio needs some help. You know, the silence, we got ambient noise that's competing with the voice. Now, there's several reasons for that. One of which would be that it wasn't recorded with the right microphone, and the levels were not set properly. So if we want to get that back, we have some work to do. So I wanted to focus on this little section and just see what we can do to help it. So all I'm going to look at is this section of the clip. In fact, I'll even limit it a little bit more than that. Let's basically limit it to this. So let's see what we got here. So you can see we have loud noises, but they have nothing to do with the actual audio. Okay, so the loud noises are actually about where the good audio should be. So let's talk about how we might fix that. And we'll focus on the audio right now. So one thing we can do is to boost the audio itself. So if I right-hand click on the audio and go to audio gain, and let's say I just gain the whole clip by 10 points, 10 decibels. Now immediately that raises the audio levels and we lose some of the loud noises. Let's see what we get here.
My name is Alexandra Fleck. I am currently a sophomore here at Methodist and my major is special education, and I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to...
Okay, now you'll notice if we zoom in on this, now at least we're getting the audio. We can hear what she's saying, but we can see that the silence is not silent. So if we go back here, these are periods of silence. And that's stage direction. But in the actual interview,
so we're doing pretty well, actually. We've been very successful. We've been blessed.
okay, so you can see that the voice is not competed with. And so just go back to where we were. So I'm going to order the full treatment for this section here. And let's see what we can do with that. Now let's look at a random section of audio here and get a look at what we can do. So I'm going to go here, and this I'm going to make a cut so that we're talking about only this piece.
And I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to...
Now see, we've got very little audio there, but we also got a lot of noise because, as you can see, the space between the words, there's just that noise area is so thick. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit all of this in Adobe Audition. So edit clip in Adobe Audition. And so what this will do is it will take us to Adobe Audition and it will give us this.
And I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to be a special education teacher.
So if I bring this up,
And I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to be a special education teacher there in my hometown.
So look at that noise. This is the space between words, and that is supposed to be silence. So what I want to do is I want to use that to fix the rest of the clip. So I'm going to select some of that just by right-hand clicking or left-hand clicking and dragging. Then I'm going to go to my effects area over here, and I'm going to go to noise reduction restoration, and I'm just going to go capture noise print. And so once that's done, you don't really see anything at this point, but if I then go to the same place, effects and noise reduction, and I apply the noise print, then I get this. And I'm going to apply 100% of that print, because see, if I move this, we can decide how much of the noise we want to get rid of. So I'm going to basically lift all of that up. And if I apply this, you notice that silence got a little better. Let's see how that sounds now.
And I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to be a special education teacher there in my hometown. My favorite food is chicken.
So there, if we were to go to Edit Undo, Control Z, then you see we get that. And if we redo the noise reduction, You see, that's what's going on. Now, we do get a little bit of issues
Be a special education teacher there.
with her voice. We're losing some of those frequencies. I wonder if we could bring a little of those back. If I go to Effects and I go to Equalization, let's say we go to a 10-band equalizer. It gives us this. And so what I want to do is I want to bring in I want to bring up some of the middle areas. I wonder if that would help. So if I play this,
To be a special education
maybe a little too much in the middle there.
teacher there in my hometown. My hometown, Pennsylvania. To be a special education teacher there in my hometown.
Okay. What if we were to, let's see, take a couple of those down.
To be a special education teacher there in my hometown.
We're losing a little bit. Let's try that.
To be a special education teacher.
Okay, so I'm going to go with this and say that we've done some good. Because it's going to be hard to make the comparison, but let's go ahead and do this. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do File, Save All, and you'll see that it updates the file here.
Education, and I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to be a special education teacher there in my hometown.
Okay, so if I play from before this started, that's what we're starting with.
And I'm planning on going back up to my hometown, Pennsylvania, to be a special education teacher there in my hometown.
So if you look at the clip, and you can even get a better look at it if we do this, you can see now that that's the voice, that's the noise. Whereas before, that was the voice and the noise was almost the same thing. And then basically you would save the project, and there you are. And so then you can close off Audition, and you're done. Now again, this file is now not the same file, but it still works. So you'd want to do this and then recompress it as soon as you can to preserve all these changes. So lo and behold, we now have this. And so now we're just looking at the audio. So let's look at this first bang here and how we might be able to do something with that. Now here we still have the ability to magnify in on that so we can see what the bang actually is. So if I were to grab the worst of it, I could just turn the actual level of that down. Let's see what that would do. Doesn't sound like it made that much of a difference, but I suspect it did. So just even get it down further. So that's a whole lot better than it was. Now that's something that you could do for something that's that distracting. Now let's look at that in one other context while we're here. Okay, so if we look at this waveform, let's see what we got.
Okay, thank you for your time.
My name is Alexander.
So let's look for a minute at this frequency here, because we may not be able to do much with this. This is just plain awful. But if we were to go into our spectral editor and then click back on this, we then get basically the Bandaid tool. So if we go over some of this, that's the voice, and those are frequencies we actually want. But what about this one? So that's when he's saying okay. Let's see if we can get rid of that altogether. Not that we would necessarily want to, but if we did, we could. See? Gone. So if that was a distracting noise, I would say that we'd actually achieve something. Okay, so again, you may not use this right away, but I want you to be aware that it exists. The fact that the program can reach out to other programs is very important.